Hey friends, are you ready for a story that'll give you chills? Picture this, a dark highway, strange cries echoing in the night, and road signs leading somewhere they shouldn't. This isn't just a tale, it's a mystery that unfolds over three gripping parts, and trust me, you won't stop until you know how it ends. I'm Tim, and I've dug up this creepy story for you. It's got 3 parts, and I know it'll hook you. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let's dive into this enigma together. Here we go.
Sometimes the rude signs lie. A few weeks ago, my wife and I went on a road trip for a family reunion in El Paso, Texas. I am now sitting in the hospital waiting room, desperately wishing we hadn't. "How much longer?" Melanie asked, leaning her seat back and putting her hand into the small of her back in a feeble attempt to find a more comfortable position. "Google says we've got a few more hours to go," I said, glancing quickly at my phone sitting in the cup holder, then putting my eyes back to the road. "Do we need to stop again?" Melanie shifted in her seat a bit, removed her hand from behind her, then sat it back up to its original vertical position. At 7 months pregnant, her options for comfort were quickly dwindling, and none of them involved the front seat of a car. "No, let's just go. If we stop again, I'm not going to want to get back into the car." "Signal lost," my phone's robotic female voice announced. "God damn it," I sighed. The phone had been doing that for the past couple of hours at increasing intervals. There had been apparently an accident or something on the main highway, which would have backed us up by at least an hour according to the all-knowing Google. In order to avoid that, we'd taken a detour that snaked around the accident through the desert on a 2-lane highway. That had been 3 hours ago, maybe more. It was hard to keep track of when it had happened, because even before the phone had alerted us of the accident, the whole trip had been little more than a palette of browns and grays, broken up only by the regular bathroom break. As I saw it, the New Mexico desert was a skid mark on the underpants of America, and if I never had the pleasure of driving through it again, it would be too soon. The sun had set about an hour ago, not long before the signal started getting more spotty, and the highway hypnosis had really started to get to me. There was nothing but desert on either side of us, and even with the high beams on, the darkness covered us like a thick blanket.
Got any more Red Bull? I asked. If we're gonna go for a few more hours, I need some wings. Melanie reached into the back seat for a second, grunting with discomfort, then returned with a can of Red Bull. "Last one," she said. "This was sitting in the seat, so the sun warmed it up for you." "Great," I said, taking the can, cracking the seal, and swallowing 3 large gulps. "This'll sit well with all the other junk I've been eating for the past 2 days." Without a baby on the way, Mel and I could have driven the stretch between Bozeman and El Paso in 2 days without a problem. But with her being as pregnant as she was, we had to carve out almost double the time, and she was still miserable. I let out a burp that tasted like all the atrocious snacks and truck-stop food from that day, mixed with the warm energy drink I was layering on top, and solemnly promised myself I would eat nothing but salad and water for the rest of my life. "Turn left here for the Church of Christ." "I thought the Church of Christ was back there," Mel said, viewing a dilapidated sign as we passed it. "No, that was the Church of Jesus Christ," I said. Big difference, apparently. All through the drive, we'd seen a wide variety of local churches, mostly generic, but after passing one called the Church of Liberty, over a backdrop of the poorly drawn Confederate flag, we had turned it into a sort of game so you could find the most outlandish one. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the engine and the intermittent signal lost notification from my phone. I had looked at the phone earlier when the signal was stronger and saw that we just needed to go to the end of this road, turn right, and he'd find ourselves getting back onto the freeway. So although the announcement from the cup holder was annoying, I wasn't particularly concerned. That was until we saw a sign that said, "Freeway entrance left, 1 mile." "I thought you said it was a right at the end of the road," Melody said, sitting up and grabbing the phone.
"That's what it said," I insisted. "I checked it last time we had service like a half an hour ago. We had about 60 or so miles to go, and then it was right." "How sure are you?" she asked, putting the phone back into the cup holder. "'Cause your phone is still saying it has no service, so it's not going to be any help." "Pretty damn," I said. Just then we passed another sign. "Freeway entrance, left, 0.5 mile. "At least I think so." "I think we should follow the signs," Mel said. "I don't want to get lost out here, and the phone hasn't had consistent service in a while. It could have reset and changed routes or something to have us avoid the highway. Remember last time?" I did remember last time. A Vegas trip that ended up being 4 hours longer than it should have been because my phone reset and that was taking frontage roads and city streets. It would have been longer had Mel not thought to check the route on her phone. I was sure that I had seen it was taking us back to the highway and that the next turn was a right in about 30 minutes or so given our current speed. But with the evidence to the contrary quickly approaching me in the darkness, illuminated by my headlights, I made the single most critical mistake that I would regret for the rest of my life. I followed the street sign and turned left. Mel leaned back in her seat, embarking again on her quest for a comfortable position, and I continued to stare at the lines in the road as we passed. Time begins to lose meaning when you've been on the road in the dark for as long as we were that night. It could have been hours that we spent speeding straight down the desert road, or it could have been days. With no focal point, it was really up to the clock alone to tell us how long we'd been there, and the clock on the dashboard had inexplicably reset at some point, something it did on occasion for most of the time I'd owned the car. Another bullet from Melanie to fire at me whenever we got into our marital splats. I didn't care, and she really didn't either. But it was another straw to load up on the camel's back, nonetheless.
My faith in the phone had begun to waver even further, as I was becoming sure even that clock was running slow somehow. We go for 5 or 6 miles according to the odometer, and the clock would read only a minute or two had passed. I drained the last bit of Red Bull down my throat, again promising myself nothing but clean eating after this trip was over. Moments later, I felt a dull pressure in my bowels. The last drop of liquid must have been the last straw for my bladder. Mel slept quietly next to me, having finally crashed a while back, and I made the second decision I would come to regret. Although we hadn't seen another car for miles, I flipped my hazard lights on and pulled over to the side of the road. I turned off the car and stepped out of the car and relieved myself, relishing in one of the finer points of being a man and having the ability to take a leak in the middle of the road without much fanfare, and return to the car. Mel stirred then and asked if we were there yet. Not yet. Just a bit further. Had to take a leak. She rolled her eyes and closed them again. I turned the key to start the car back up and heard a sound that sank my heart into my stomach. Click, 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 click. "Oh, shit," I said under my breath. "Please don't do this." I turned the key again, and once more heard the series of clicks telling me that my battery didn't have enough power to start back up. Fuck, I sighed, resting my head against the steering wheel in defeat. "What's wrong?" Mel asked, opening one eye. "Battery's dead." "What?" There was a hint of panic in her voice, and she sat back up, totally awake now. "But the car was just running." "Yeah, it was running off of the alternator. The battery needs just enough power to start, then the cart can run off of the power generated by the alternator. All that we need is a jump, and we should be able to get the rest of the way as long as we don't turn the car off. But who's going to jump us? When was the last time you saw a car? It's been a while, I admitted. Definitely not since we made that turn back there.
Fuck, Mel spat. Fuck. Stay here, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. Where are you going? She asked, the panic in her voice rising. Just up there, I said, pointing down the road. I think I see a sign, maybe 100 yards out there. It might give us an idea of which direction we need to go, or if we need to just wait until the sun comes up. I could tell she didn't like it, but she didn't say anything. I'll keep my flashlight on so you can see where I am. I'll just go there, then straight back. She nodded. Unless I see a Denny's, then you're on your own. She flipped me off. I kissed her cheek and stepped out into the night. The air was brisk, despite having been downright hot during the day, and I remembered learning in science class as a kid that desert wildlife had to be tough enough to endure not only the heat during the day, but the cold, sometimes freezing temperatures at night as well. I shivered and hugged my arms around my torso and made way down the road to where I thought I'd seen a road sign. As I approached, I realized it wasn't the kind of sign I was hoping for. It was made of cracked wood that looked just as better than this sign for the church we'd seen a while back, and on it, painted in white letters, it read, Gomper's Farm, above a crudely drawn arrow pointing down a dirt path to the right. My gaze followed the arrow, and I thought I could see a light far off in the distance. A scream broke through the darkness that turned my blood to ice. Mel? I called, wheeling around and bolting back the way I came. Melanie! What? Melanie called back, alarmed. I slowed when I heard her voice and held the light up again. She was standing on the passenger side of the car with the door open. I thought you heard you screaming, I said through heaving breaths. She looked around, confused. No, I didn't hear that, I asked.
She shook her head. No, I don't think so. I was in the car until I heard you yelling, though. Where did it come from? I don't know, I said, shaking my head and spitting the bitter flavor of adrenaline into the dirt. Maybe it was an animal or something, she suggested. What did the sign say? There's a farmhouse or something about a mile down the road, I think. It's not exactly ideal, but if I jog it, I could make it in about 10 minutes or so. If anyone's there, all they'd have to do was give me a ride back and help us jump the car. If nobody's there, we'll probably have to wait till morning unless a car happens to pass by. She mulled it over for a moment. Then I saw the resolve on her face, and I knew what was coming next. I'm going with you then. I didn't like it, but I could tell that arguing wasn't going to get me anywhere but the doghouse. And considering the scream I heard, or thought I heard anyway, I preferred having her close. I agreed. Grab your jacket, though. I'm going to grab mine and a couple of water bottles for the back. A moment later, we were hiking down the road, our silhouettes illuminated intermittently by the orange hazard lights we'd elected to leave on. I doubted the battery would last if those lights were on too long. But if someone was driving past, I would hate for him to miss it. Mel had thought to leave a note on the windshield, telling whomever found it that we'd gone to the farmhouse and would be back shortly. If anyone was kind enough to stop, they'd hopefully see the letter and stick around long enough to help. That, or they'd know where to look for us coming back so they could take whatever they wanted out of the car before we returned. There was a cool breeze that played with our hair as we walked. Not uncomfortable, but enough to make me zip my jacket up just a bit more. Mel held the only flashlight we had, and the beam bounced up and down in the darkness like a buoy.
A chilling story that keeps you on edge from the first line. The desolate road, cryptic signs, and mounting sense of dread create an oppressive atmosphere. Matt and Melanie, weary and vulnerable, are perfect protagonists for this unsettling journey.
where every rustle in the dark makes your heart race. Let's dive into the second chapter of the story.
Hey friends, are you ready for a story that'll give you chills? Picture this, a dark highway, strange cries echoing in the night, and road signs leading somewhere they shouldn't. This isn't just a tale, it's a mystery that unfolds over 3 gripping parts. And trust me, you won't stop until you know how it ends. I'm Tim, and I've dug up this creepy story for you. It's got 3 parts, and I know it'll hook you. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let's dive into this enigma together. Here we go.
Melanie was totally out by the time I entered the room. She couldn't have been there for long, but I saw that Ruthie had set her up nicely with a nest of pillows in all the right places, and it looked like this might be the first night in weeks that she got a decent night's sleep. I undressed down to my boxers and slid into bed next to my wife. I was exhausted, but sleep was nowhere to be found. And so I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, wondering about the decisions that had led us there. There had been a knot growing in the pit of my stomach ever since we'd parked the car, and it had only tightened since we'd arrived at the farmhouse. Arthur and Ruthie were nice enough, but there was something they weren't telling us. If I were watching the night play out like a movie, I imagined that the twist would be that they were secretly plotting our demise, or that the screaming sounds I'd been hearing were those of their victims chained up in the large garage behind the house, but I didn't think so. It wasn't that I didn't think they were capable. I'd only just met them and had no idea what they were actually capable of. It was more that it just didn't seem to fit. It was the look on Arthur's face when he asked me if I'd been with Melanie the whole time we'd been stopped there. It was the undertone in his voice when he told whatever was outside that he was just telling me a story. It was the story itself. What was that exactly? Just an elderly man retelling a memory from his childhood. Or was it something else? A cry echoed outside the window, this one sounding like "Ma." It seemed more believable now that it was a bird, because it certainly didn't sound human now that I'd had the chance to hear it without other sound pollution.
Not exactly human, anyway. Melanie snorted beside me, the preamble to a full-on snore coming in the next few weeks, I was sure. Another scream, this one closer, but from a different direction. The birds were all talking to each other. I sighed and closed my eyes, trying to will myself to sleep, even if it was for just a couple of hours. The house was cold, probably from poor insulation and the single-paned windows. I pulled the sheets up and turned to my side, pulling my knees up to my chest for a little extra warmth. I was nearly asleep when I heard claws scratch the wall outside the house, and my eyes flew open. Was that the coyotes again? Did coyotes do that? I wasn't sure. I sat up and listened for more, knowing full well that in the morning I would feel silly for being as scared as I was, but also knowing that the night has a way of making monsters come out, even if they're just the ones in your head. A scream broke through the silence, this one incredibly loud and right outside the window. I looked over at Melanie, expecting her to be as awake as I was, but she only stirred. I got out of bed and crossed the room, throwing the curtains open, hoping to scare away whatever was sitting outside. I hadn't expected to see a face on the other side of the glass. I stumbled backward, tripping on my own feet and falling onto the wooden floor with a sharp thud. From where I lay, I could see nothing but moonlight coming through the crack in the curtain, and for that I was thankful. Had the face been that of Arthur, I would at least understand, despite how sick it will have made me feel.
But the face I saw through the glass wasn't Arthur or Ruthie. I don't think it was even human.
Just like the sounds of screaming I had heard through the wall. It was close to being human, but still not quite right. The eyes were too big and far apart, the mouth too wide, the nose too flat. Could it have been my reflection? The logical part of my mind liked that answer. It liked it a lot. I stood up cautiously, fearful that the face would still be there peering at me through the glass. But as I stood, I saw that that wasn't the case. I could see myself in the glass just well enough to convince myself that that's what I had seen. Scared of my own reflection. Had Melanie been awake, there's no way I would ever live this one down. But despite the noises I had just made, she still lay soundly asleep. I closed the curtains again, taking care to ensure that not a sliver of moonlight came through them, then lay back down next to my wife. I didn't sleep much that night. I don't think I would have regardless, given the intermittent screams and cries coming from just outside my bedroom window. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see the image of the face that was looking at me through the glass. A circus funhouse image of a human face burned into my retinas like the flash of a camera lens. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because I opened my eyes to find rods of sunlight cast from the window into the bedroom. Melanie was stirring, which meant soon she'd be awake and in the bathroom. I checked my phone, still no service, but it reported the time to be just before 6. I got out of bed and got dressed, determined to get out of there as soon as Melanie was ready. The image from the night before had dulled by then, and although the memory still gave me the creeps, the logical part of my brain had daylight on its side, and by the end of breakfast I would have myself convinced that that's what I had seen. Scared of my own reflection. Had Melanie been awake, there's no way I would ever live this one down, but despite the noises I had just made, she still lay soundly asleep. I closed the curtains again, taking care to ensure that not a sliver of moonlight came through them, then lay back down next to my wife. I didn't sleep much that night. I don't think I would at regardless, given the intermittent screams and cries coming from just outside my bedroom window. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see the image of the face that was looking at me through the glass. A circus funhouse image of a human face burned into my retinas like the flash of a camera lens. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because I opened my eyes to find rods of sunlight cast from the window into the bedroom. Melanie was stirring, which meant soon she'd be awake and in the bathroom. I checked my phone, still no service, but it reported the time to be just before 6. I got out of bed and got dressed, determined to get out of there as soon as Melanie was ready. The image from the night before had dulled by then, and although the memories still gave me the creeps, the logical part of my brain had daylight on its hide. And by the end of breakfast, I would have myself convinced that it had been my reflection in the glass. I quietly opened the door and stepped out of the bedroom. The scent of coffee wafted through the air, although I didn't hear anyone moving around the house just yet. I made my way to the kitchen, expecting to find either Arthur or Ruth sitting down at the table enjoying a mug, or at least a full pot of coffee with the timer that had gone off. Instead, I found 2 empty mugs of coffee and a half pot sitting on the burner. I didn't have time to wonder where they had gotten off to, because I heard Ruthie's voice in the yard calling to Arthur. I peeked out of the window to see Arthur's truck backing up toward the large garage. Was it just the one? She called him over the sound of the truck's engine. Arthur turned off the truck, stepped out of the driver's seat, and came around to the bed, where he had 2 large iron poles sticking out over the back.
No, it was 2 this time, he said. Got a 1.5-mile one now. He dropped the tailgate of the truck, and the 2 metal poles clattered loudly. They're getting more clever, Ruth, Arthur said, hoisting a large street signs out of the back of the truck and carrying them to the shed. It was only the one sign with the Pruitts, and I don't even know where they're getting these things. Probably off some stretch of the road around here. We're going to have to do something about it, sooner or— Don't you say such a thing, Ruthie said sharply. I know, Arthur said, putting his hands up. I'm sorry. I just don't like cleaning up their messes is all. Well, take it up with them, Ruthie said. He's your— Arthur looked fiercely at her, and she didn't finish her sentence. He may be yours, but he ain't mine. Mine's out of the apple tree. The couple walked around toward the door, and I quickly slipped back to the bedroom. Melanie was sitting up. Hey, Matt, what time is it? I don't know, I said. Somewhere around 6, I think. We should get going, though. Melanie stretched. Yeah, she said, through a wide yawn. That's probably a good idea. How'd you sleep? I slept great, I lied, knowing that the truth would surely cause questions that I'd rather not answer just then. Me too, she said, scratching the back of her head. Best night's sleep I've had since I got pregnant. Let me pee, and then I'll get dressed, and we can go. I agreed, trying not to sound too eager with the rising sense of unease filling my gut. She got out of bed, donned a robe that I assumed Ruthie had given her the night before, and padded her way to the guest bathroom across the hall.
A chilling tale that grips you with its eerie atmosphere and mounting dread. The desolate farmhouse, strange cries in the night, and that haunting face at the window create a spine-tingling sense of unease. Nat's sleepless terror and the cryptic conversation about the road signs deepen the mystery, leaving you desperate to know what's lurking out there. Intriguing and unsettling, it's impossible to stop reading. Let's race to the final chapter of the story. What secrets are Arthur and Ruthie hiding, and what's with those signs? The truth is waiting. Let's uncover it.
I never thought I'd return to Gomper's farm, let alone so quickly. But circumstances change, and with them, expectations. It took me nearly a whole day to find the road the signs had led us down, and by then it was dusk, and I returned back to my hotel so as not to be out after dark. Melanie stayed home this time. Her condition had gotten significantly worse since our road trip, and she had been prescribed bed rest by the OBGYN, among other things, until she was ready to deliver. Her mother hadn't been happy with me flying out to New Mexico, even with the lie we told her about it being a work trip. But her mother's chagrin was a small price to pay for what I was hoping to get out of a reunion with Arthur and Ruthie. I drove up the dirt road, following the only street sign now for Gomper's farm, hoping to find an answer to something that had happened to us not long after returning home. I parked my car next to Arthur's pickup truck and stepped out. I waited for a moment, wondering if I would hear the sound of the birds carrying human-like screams along the air. To my relief, I heard nothing at all. I walked around to the front of the house, prepared to knock as I had mere weeks before, but found that I didn't need to. The door to the farmhouse was open. Dirt coated the entrance floor, suggesting that it had been open for a while. Cautiously, remembering the face I had seen in the window, but feeling the bravery given to me by the daylight, I called out into the house. "Hello," I called. "Arthur! Ruthie!"
No reply. I stepped into the house, noting first that the shotgun Arthur had answered the door with was no longer propped against the wall in the corner by the door. "Hello?" I called again. "Is anyone there?" I explored the house carefully, worried that I surprised anyone too much, that I would find my skull full of buckshot, but sensing that I was totally alone.
The kitchen was clean, with only a couple of plates in the sink with dried-on food that could have been from the night before, or perhaps longer. The bedroom where Mel and I had stayed looked exactly like we had left it. I called out again as I headed up the stairs toward the part of the house I hadn't been. There were 3 doors down the hallway from the top of the stairs. I chose the first and opened it. It was a young boy's room, a time capsule from decades ago. The boy who had once dwelt here must have been 6 or so, judging by the toys, books, and decorations that filled the space. Above the bed, in large block letters, was the name Jonathan. The next room was a bathroom, adorned with yellow daisies over most of the surfaces. I opened the door to the final room and was struck by 2 things simultaneously. First was the body of Ruthie Gomper laying in the bed. She wore a nightgown and looked as if she had gone peacefully in her sleep. Second was the putrid odor that had somehow not completely filled the house, possibly because the door had been left open. It was clear that she had been dead for at least a few days, perhaps not long after Mel and I had left. But there was still no sign of Arthur. I went downstairs and out the front door, glad to be rid of the smell that followed me after I opened the door. I walked around the side of the house, calling Arthur's name and getting nothing in return. I checked inside the large shed and found the road signs that Mel and I had seen driving down the road that night, along with a third that said, "Freeway entrance, left, 1 mile." Just like the first sign we had seen. I turned the flashlight in my phone on and held it up to get a better look at the shed. There was some old farm equipment scattered around the area, but what caught my attention was toward the back. I took a few more steps to get a better look and found a corner of the space had been decorated like a bedroom.
There was an old bed with a rusty frame and a torn mattress set up in the corner, along with a collection of what appeared to be chew toys sprinkled around. Above the bed, in block letters, similar to the boys' bedroom I had seen in the house, was the name Christopher. I took a few more curious steps forward to get a better look at the makeshift living space, then felt something at my feet. I stooped to pick up the item buried in the dirt and found part of a chain. As I picked it up, the chain emerged from its resting place in the ground, and as I pulled it up, I found that it was connected to a large metal pole posted near the bed. I followed the chain on the other side and found, at the end, part of a broken shackle. I dropped the chain, letting it tingle to the ground, and laughed as quickly as I could. If Arthur was here, I knew that this was the last place he would want me to be. I examined the rest of the farmyard, wondering where, if at all, I would find Arthur, and my eyes landed on a shape beneath a tree in the distance. I could hear Arthur's words from the weeks before, "Mine's under the apple tree," and wondered if this was the tree he had spoken of. As I drew closer, the shape beneath the tree became clearer, and I recognized it as the man I sought. "Arthur!" I called, beginning to jog now. "Arthur, I really need you." I stopped. It was Arthur. but he wouldn't be answering any of my questions. The top of his skull was missing, and his body was slumped against the trunk of the tree, hunched over the barrel of the shotgun that still rested in his mouth. His body was covered in bite marks and scratches that looked like perhaps he had given himself the least painful death presented to him. Beside Arthur's body stood a wooden cross with the name Jonathan carved into the horizontal piece. He had said his was under the apple tree. He had meant his son. Which begged the question I had come with that now seemed wouldn't be answered. What happened to the other boy?
Those things didn't like that and stopped him. They had cried out in the dark outside the window as they listened to him tell me the story about the brood parasite birds and the birds who mimicked the sounds of children crying. They didn't like it because by then they had laid their egg, leaving nothing but a faint white scar encircling her navel that was nearly completely gone now, and they didn't want us to know. I wondered if Arthur had killed Christopher before taking his own life. The wounds on his body told the story of a man who had fought hard against a wild animal, and I could only imagine it had been the creature who had been born from his wife's womb alongside his son. He had told me that the black bird had ripped the other bird to pieces when he was a boy, and I couldn't help but think that the same thing had happened to his son at the hand of the other. If that were true, the only thing that could stand between Arthur and redemption for his son was Ruthie, and with her gone, that was all he had left to do. I could see him discovering her death and setting out to avenge the death of his only son after all these years, only to find that the fight was one he could no longer win. He had taken his gun outside and had searched for the beast, eventually finding him and perhaps killing him before crawling his way up to where his son lay and turning the gun on himself, lest the wounds take his life instead. Or perhaps not. There was no way to be sure. Not really. I got back to my car and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands shook as I turned the key and started back down the road. My phone found service for just a moment, and I looked down and saw that I had 3 missed calls, 2 from Mel and 1 from her mother. There was a text message as well that read, "It's happening." I was about to be a father. I stepped on the gas pedal and sped back down toward the main road, stopping only for a moment to make the turn at the now defunct sign that read Gomper's Farm. As I made the turn and the sound of the engine was just low enough, I thought I could hear a cry carried in the air. The sound was almost human. Ma.
This haunting tale masterfully weaves a sense of creeping dread through the mundane setting of a road trip gone wrong. The desolate New Mexico desert, deceptive road signs, and the eerie atmosphere of Gomper's farm created chilling backdrop that keeps you hooked. Matt and Melanie's vulnerability, especially with her pregnancy, amplifies the tension, making every strange noise and shadowy figure feel like a looming threat. The story's strength lies in its subtlety. It never fully reveals the nature of the creatures or the farm's dark history, leading you to piece together the horrifying implications. Arthur and Ruthie's cryptic behavior, paired with the revelation of the brood parasite metaphor, adds layers of unease that linger long after the final line. The ending, with Matt racing back to a twin pregnancy, and the ominous cry in the air is a gut punch that leaves you questioning what's next for their unborn children. Guys, did you love this story as much as I did? Drop a comment below and let me know what stuck with you the most. Those creepy golden eyes, the face at the window, and maybe Arthur's chilly warning. I'd love to hear your thoughts. That's all for now. Thanks for sticking with it till the end. I really appreciate your support with a like, subscribe, or share.